So tonight I'm gonna share something. My grandmother passed away, and this morning were her services. Um, there were many things that happened leading up to her services. Um, I had the opportunity to go to the hospital before her body ceased its functions. Initially, when my gram was taken to the hospital by ambulance, I was tempted to go as soon as I got the call, but I distinctly heard the message that I was to stay out of it. And I didn't understand what that meant until later, and I didn't even know who it was that was communicating with me until later. I now know it was my gram. There were things that happened. So it was expected that she was going to pass away very quickly. And I had already heard the message that I was to stay out of it, whatever that meant. And so I did nothing. Later on that day, many hours later, 6, 8 hours later, my grandmother was still, her body was still breathing. And I was then impressed that it was time for me to go. The hospital was a couple of hours away from my home, and so I got to the hospital about 9:30 in the evening and was able to be there in her hospital room for the whole night and left at 7 o'clock the next morning. As it was communicated to me, her body took its last breaths just as I was laying down to sleep once I had arrived home. All of these things were systematic pointers to tell me that she was communicating with me. Some things happened while I was at the hospital. Something played out, and I actually spoke the words that I didn't understand why this was happening the way it was, and stood at the bedside holding my grandmother's hand, closed my eyes, and was in direct communication with her, where she was telling me, she was informing me of the situation. She was showing me different things. And now I'm going to say it to you like this, okay? I have had communication from spirit that I think of as Christ, or the Christ within me, my Christed self, my higher self. I've had all kinds of experiences like that. This was the most personal of any such experience I've ever had. And now that her services have occurred and that has already played out, I am able to speak to you about this. And so I stood there by her bed holding her hand as she was showing me all of these things. And I want to speak to you about what that looks like, or what that is. And I need to say a thank you to my brother Tim for helping to clear this up so that I can understand it the way everyone else may perceive it. This is nothing different than what all of the human race can do. I am not special. I am not different than anyone else. We have 12 senses, at least 12 senses. 5 of them you are familiar with, right? You see, hear, taste, smell, touch. 5 senses. There are 7 more than the 5 senses. So as it is spoken in, I think it's spoken in Communications with God, where God says, and it may be a different text, that if you're only using the 5 senses, you're getting less than half of the picture. You're understanding less than half of what is really going on. This is completely true. The only difference is that I pay attention to those things. So the information, when I'm receiving information, it is transmitted to me in the way of feelings, okay? I allow those feelings. I tune into those feelings. I don't suppress. I don't reject them. No, I can. I can. I am human. I have that ability. But if I truly allow myself to be with those feelings translate into information. That is how it happens for me. So I get a preponderance of feelings that translate into information. To me, this is what telepathy is. Telepathic communication is nonverbal, okay? And if you're not comfortable with that, I'm sorry, that's where we're going. Eventually, we're going to have that ability. We may use our mouths for eating and smiling and things like that, but eventually we'll be able to communicate without the use of verbal language because it's very limiting. It's just very, very limiting. So anyway, I was not sure that the information I was receiving was accurate. I was not sure that it was where it was coming from. And things occurred systematically that proved to me that the information was in fact verifiable, and I did do that, was in fact coming from my grandmother. And so I was very confident in that then. She impressed upon me, not at the time when she was in the hospital, but after her passing, she impressed upon me. It was the morning after she passed, that I was to make note of some things, which I did do. I sat down at my computer and I started typing some things out, and she shared with me a reiteration of some of the things that she had shared with me while we were in the hospital room, and also some other things. So I had communicated to a family member of mine who was involved in organizing the services for my grandmother that I had a message that my gram desired me to deliver at her services. I somehow then was excluded from being informed of when my grandmother's services were going to be. So late last night, I found out quite accidentally that my grandmother's services were scheduled for this morning. I felt as though I was being excluded intentionally. I felt as though it was more than likely because I had already spoken of this message that I was asked to deliver by my grandmother. So I was of the mind that I did not want to go to the services because I didn't want to go where I was not wanted. Because this also communicated to me that whatever message my gram wanted me to share was going to fall on deaf ears anyway. So what was the point of standing up in front of everyone and going through this, what was very difficult, if no one was going to listen? So I spoke to my brother on the phone, and my brother had some issues going on with the family also, and he was very, very adamant he was not going. And I said, well, if you're not going, then I'm not going, because I don't need to go for me. I can communicate with my gram right now, any moment. I don't need to go where her body is laying. I don't need to do that for me. And I don't need to stand up in front of everyone and make nice and appear to appease everyone else. I don't need to do that. So I just won't go either. I said, are you 100% sure you're not going to go? And he said, yes, I'm not going. Okay. This morning, again, random things that happened, and they're not random because I don't believe in coincidence. So more synchronicity. We had been on the phone for a couple of hours last night, he and I let my cell phone sit and it went dead. I plugged it in this morning, and turned it on about 10 o'clock, just before 10 o'clock. No, maybe it was 10 o'clock. And as soon as it had enough of a charge, I turned the phone back on, and there was a message from my brother, 1, 2, 3, I don't know how many, saying, hey, I've changed since you and I talked last night. Some of the things you said made sense. And, it really doesn't feel right to me to not go to this thing. So I've decided to go, and I hope I see you there. At which point, there was no thinking about it. I got up and began to get ready to go to this service because I didn't have to think about it. He said, I hope to see you there, and that was all it took. I love my brother very much. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay. So, I drove to this thing, and I sat listening to the preacher preach whatever they do. Listen to the things he said, marveling over what a preacher can say, and it's received well, knowing that I was going to get up in front of these people that I recognized as my family, and that the message I was going to give them was not going to be received well. But I kept telling myself, it doesn't matter, because Graham asked you to do this thing. And even no matter how I tried to get out of it, because I did, listen, I informed the people that were preparing the services that I was planning on doing this. And it's very apparent to me that they tried to exclude me from it, and that didn't happen. So I think, everything was lining up that I was supposed to go do this thing. My brother wasn't going to go, so I wasn't going to go. And then he had a change of heart. So I was sitting there going, everything Graham has pushed for this. This is obviously important to her. And who am I to, go against that? So when it came time and we were offered to say whatever, I took my 2.5 pages of typed material up to the front, and I began. And I actually said before I started, God, give me strength, because my hands were shaking. Was literally the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. The hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And so I stood up there and I read the material. About halfway through, one of the family members tried to stop me by telling me to wrap it up. We didn't have all day, which I felt my body just scoff and I went back to it. Though I will have to tell you, I was not present during the reading of the material, because at that point, my ego was doing some other stuff. My ego was wrapped all up in all kinds of speak at this family member. But my body continued to read, and whoever was responsible for continuing to read that, I thank you if it made sense, because some aspect of me had checked out. I concluded this thing, and I could feel the disdain. I could feel the unpleasant emotions that were boiling in that room. I couldn't stay. I sat down. I allowed myself a few minutes thinking that maybe if I sat down, it would settle and resolve, and it continued to get worse. And so once the preacher had concluded the thing and then we were going to go, they were dismissing us to go out to the cemetery. I looked at my brother, I got his attention, and I said, I have to go right now. I have to go right now. So at that point, I could no longer avoid the flight response, because that's what it was. You know, I was fleeing the situation. As I was walking to the car, my little son, who is 9, couldn't understand why we were booking it so quickly. And I said, and I just said out loud, I was holding his hand, but I said out loud to my Graham, I said, I did it, Graham. I did what you wanted me to do. And, you know, it's very difficult because I know that the majority of those people, probably 98% of those people in that room that I had considered family at some point, think I'm insane. Why am I sharing this with you on this channel? I think it's going to become very, very important. Because what I'm going to say is, if it's happening to me, it is happening. No one is alone in this experience. And so I know that I am not the only one. It is going to become very important for us to learn to be who we are in the toughest of situations. We must learn to exercise the highest form of integrity. And I'm going to tell you right now, I would have rather faced a firing squad than have faced what I did today. So we are moving into what is going to be a much better world. But that doesn't mean there isn't going to be some challenges and some struggles that do come up. And they do. And, you know, that was my experience today. I had to stand in front of people that I knew were going to judge me, that I knew were going to ridicule me, that I knew did not want to hear the message. But to someone, it was important that it be delivered. Whether it be my Graham, whether it be Christ, whether it be whoever, to someone who was able to influence me quite strongly, it was important to them that it be delivered. And I don't know who may have been there. And maybe it didn't even matter if anyone in that room heard me. Maybe it was just because I was willing to do it. I was willing to do what I was asked to do by a higher power. Again, more labels, higher power, right? Maybe it was in the act of showing a devotion to my grandmother. Maybe it was just that. You know, I don't know. It may have had nothing to do with the words and everything to do with being willing to be in that position. Being willing to stand for something. And maybe that's all it's about, is being willing to stand for something. So, just wanted to share that with you. My grandma's telling me these days that I'm looking old, so where she is, I look old. So that's probably true. In peace and love, may you be blessed.